Okay, we'll change gears now as this next portion of the forum is hosted by Raise Your Hand Texas. It'll focus exclusively on public education. Raise Your Hand Texas is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization which works to support our state's public schools through voter outreach and legislative advocacy, most often centered in our state's capital and with the work of our state senators and representatives, which is why we're asking these guys these questions. This past regular legislative session and subsequent record number of called special sessions, 4, focused greatly on public education, and the stakes were high for all Texans, notably our children, educators, and future. It is in that vein we thought it most appropriate to invite an educator of our own to address the candidates for this portion of tonight's event. I welcome Ms. Cassandra Harris to the podium now. Cassandra is a 24-year educator. Currently, you'll find her guiding and sculpting young minds at Tascosa High School. Cassandra was invited to represent the Texas Panhandle on Governor Greg Abbott's Teacher Vacancy Task Force in 2022. Cassandra is a stellar and passionate educator who is not only masterful at her skill, but uses that expertise and love to advocate for her profession and students. The decisions made at the Capitol in sessions to come will impact her work greatly, for better or for worse, and whomever wins these seats will have a say in those decisions. Ms. Harris, ask away.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Where's my questions? Thank you.
Well, I took it.
You did. You took it. Okay. Good evening. I thank you for the opportunity to address tonight's candidates in these very important races about critical issues facing my students and my profession. During my time on that teacher task force, there was one constant in every meeting. Teachers must be paid as the highly skilled and trained professionals we are. Our recommendations were teachers should receive more training and support. We need better and more sustainable working conditions. And again, we must be paid more. Last year, HB 1 by Chairman Buckley during the 4th special session was one of the House's landmark votes on school issues. The bill contained $7.5 billion for school funding, including funds for $2,000 to $4,000 teacher pay raise. The bill also contained a voucher provision. This voucher provision was stripped by a vote of 84 to 63, and the bill was ultimately withdrawn. What is the path forward for providing public schools and teachers with additional funding? And we'll start with you, Ms. Bulla. Oh, start with you.
The question is about, what is your specific question?
Yeah.
Okay, so additional funding as far as teacher raises or funding that goes directly to the school?
Both.
Okay,
teacher raises predominantly as the teacher standing here, yes.
Okay, so I'll address both. So I think it's shameful that just 10 or 15 years ago, Texas was ranking towards the top, trending towards the top as far as teacher pay, as far as our education that we're delivering to our children, as far as testing scores that we were getting back from our children. It looked like we were really doing well. And then for some reason, and I don't know why, but we have to blame ourselves because we Republicans have been in office for 30 years right now. We are now trending towards the bottom on teacher pay. We're trending towards the bottom on educational skills. And everybody's crying and whining, we don't want to teach to the test. We don't want to teach to the test. Well, how the hell do we measure what our students are doing unless there's a test? So I don't mind teachers getting more money. Just like any profession, you deserve to be paid. But I also believe there should be accountability, and we should have something to measure that by. As taxpayers, I believe that we deserve to know that our teachers are teaching. And if they're not teaching, something needs to be done. And if that means lack of raises, then that means lack of raises. Now, with regard to the funding going directly to the school, no doubt the cost of education is not going to go down. I'm sorry to break the news to you, but it's never, ever going to happen. It's going to continue to go up. Unless enrollments just tank completely by 20 or 30%, we're going to continue to have to dig. It's getting more expensive, just like everything else. Inflation. We have to provide our teachers with the necessary resources. They shouldn't have to buy pencils and pads and pens for some students. We need to provide the money. We have the money. By the way, we had a $35 billion surplus this year, okay? Everything got paid for, no problems whatsoever, and $35 billion is left over. What do you call that? Overtaxation is what I call it. That's not a little bit of money. That's like being way off. What that means is good news. We have a lot of money to spend, and why shouldn't it go to education? I don't care if it hits 70% of our budget, it's worth it.
So I regret in the course of the last year or so, teachers and schools have kind of been beaten down a little bit, and I know they're feeling that. I hear it a lot, and that's unfortunate. We really have excellent schools here in our area. We have a lot of dedicated individuals who are doing their work, doing their job. They're educating our kids. I've got right now 3 children in public schools here in Amarillo, and 2 at Tascosa, incidentally. And we're very satisfied, very thankful for the education that they're getting. So in this last regular session, or the fourth called session, I should say, there were 2 approaches. The Senate had Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 1 was a voucher bill, and Senate Bill 2 was a funding bill that was very, very attractive as far as I was concerned, because it provided for $4,000 a year teacher pay raise for above a certain population or enrollment, urban schools, and $10,000 a year for rural school districts, which would be a tremendous increase and a tremendous help. I mean, first of all, teacher pay raises are the right thing to do because we're not paying our teachers enough in the scale of what they do. But it's also a necessity. I represent the western part of the Texas Panhandle that most of my counties border New Mexico. And so I go to places like Hereford and Friona and Bovina, and they're losing teachers who are driving from their community to Clovis because they can make $10,000 or more a year in teaching. And so we've got that money. That $5 or $6 billion is sitting in a bank in Austin, Texas. And as far as I'm concerned, as quick as we can get down there and get it pushed out to teachers, the better.
So the profession of teaching should be held up as high as any profession in this country. It represents the key to our economy, the key to our future, the key to our freedom. We need to hold teachers up as the keys to the success of us, certainly as a state and as a nation. So no, we're not paying teachers enough, and we're not treating them in the way they deserve to be treated. What we have to do with public schools is understand that we can't paint every public school in Texas with the same brush. I have visited every public school in my district, and I am telling you they are all different, and they all have different challenges, and those challenges lay squarely on the shoulders of those teachers. I am all about the conservative mantra of meritocracy. You earn what you get. We don't have any participation trophies. So I love the idea of that, but we have to consider where they start. If we have a school in Northeast Amarillo that has 53 different languages on its campus, and its test scores are lower than a school in Southwest Amarillo that might have 2, maybe we need to take a look at those teachers in that Northeast campus and pat them on the back and give them a raise because their test scores might be more impressive even than the ones in Southwest Amarillo.
So first off, I'll answer this question very directly. We have to pay our teachers more, 100%. I mean, my mom was a school teacher. My grandparents were school teachers. What they're doing is impacting the next generation of future teachers and presidents and leaders and politicians. And really, I've spent a lot of time with our public schools here in Amarillo. I went to Eastridge Elementary with David Nance, and then later had a meeting with the AISD school board to sit down with them about what are the needs in Amarillo and here that are important, and a lot of it is supporting these teachers. And when I was at Eastridge, I sat down with these amazing students and these amazing teachers, and what they're doing is not just teaching them curriculum. They're investing in them. They're giving them advice. They're also the parent and the teacher oftentimes. And what they're doing is really impactful. And really, when you look at the Panhandle, teachers play a very crucial role. They work hard hours, they work in the summer. We've got to support them. The answer is very simple. We have $6 billion to allocate to that. That was in the school funding, and we've got to make sure that we pass more raises to our teachers because it's really important what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. My next question. In my 24 years of teaching, I've seen teachers come and go out of this profession I so dearly love. But over these past few years, something is different. Teachers are no longer leaving as a result of a move or changing schools. They're leaving the profession entirely, and few are there to replace them. The reasons for leaving run the gamut from star testing pressure to attacks on their integrity to just plain not being able to pay the bills without a second or even third job. What do you think is the largest obstacle for schools in attracting and retaining our teachers? What can be done at the state level to fix some of these pressing issues?
I think part of the problem is cultural. You know, I have a lot of teachers tell me it's not just the money, that there are a lot of other reasons, that they're either leaving or thinking about leaving the teaching profession, and that's not a good thing for any of us. We need to bring teachers back up in elevation to where the teaching profession is a highly respected profession. It's one of the most important jobs that anybody in our country does, is to teach young people. And so we need to attract the best and the brightest. And I think there are several ways. One, of course, the number one way is pay, because the pay has to be competitive. We have to pay our teachers enough to get qualified young people to be interested in teaching in the first place. And then beyond that, though, we have to put teachers back in a position of respect in the classroom. I think lack of discipline is a major problem. And we also ask teachers many times to do the impossible. We grade them on a basis of what they've done when we basically told them how to do something. And so you do it the way we told you, and then it doesn't work out right, and it's your fault because you didn't. The way we told you to do it didn't work. And part of that is the STAR testing. And you know, that's actually was to be sunsetted in House Bill 1 that failed. So we're always looking for ways, but I think we all realize now that we've got to do something to bring teaching back as a profession that young people really want to do, and we can attract these students to come to our universities to get prepared to teach, and will not only get into the teaching profession, but be wanting to stay in that profession for a long time.
I'm going to agree with Representative Smithee. A lot of it is cultural. A lot of it is social. My daughter-in-law is a trained elementary education major who started out teaching in that field. And all of the things you just cited, she has told me personally, are the reasons she left the profession. We can't have that. Teachers are ground zero, and we are suffering from a litany of problems, social and cultural problems that have inured over the last decade and were especially exacerbated during the COVID lockdowns. We have teachers on the ground. They're our first line to get our arms back around the value system that made the Panhandle what it is. And we need to hold them up as the leaders and the seekers of our future that they are. And again, I can't overemphasize our schools, especially in Potter County and in these small Panhandle towns that dot all the way through District 87. They are not just the educational centers of the communities. They are the communities. We must support those schools. We must support the teachers that represent the bridge between our culture and our value system and our youth, the future that we're counting on to maintain the prosperity and the culture that we all love and that are the reasons we stayed here in the Panhandle and we love our state and our nation so much.
So there are a few things practically that we can do to help support our teachers. Funding's one of them. We've already addressed that. The other thing is there's so many regulations on these teachers. Like I was in Dumas and Stratford and in Groover, and there's a common thread that I'm hearing where these teachers I sit with, they said, Caroline, I feel like I can't do my job because there's so many regulations put on me that I can't do the discipline or I can't teach certain things, etc., because of these restrictions. And that's really government's role overstepping, and really the idea that we've got to allow these teachers and keep it local, and these school boards and really parents to just say, hey, we don't want this stuff being taught, or we want to give these teachers the freedom. But Representative Smithee nailed it when he said teachers are afraid that if they make one wrong move, something will happen. And so we've got to be mindful of the legislation we pass doesn't prohibit teachers from doing the jobs they were trained to do. And here in the Panhandle, we have these West Texas conservative values. I mean, in Perryton, a lot of the teachers there are Sunday school teachers, and they know their kids, and they see them every day and on the weekends. And so we've got to be mindful as legislators, and as your future legislator, I'm going to be very protective of not over-regulating these teachers. Of course, we need accountability. Of course, we want to protect the children, but funding and regulations are a big part, and the other part is social. The overarching idea of teachers in Texas sometimes is frowned upon, and we've got to change it. I mean, what they did, and I've said this again, and I'll say it again, they impact the next generation of leaders. What they do is very important and impactful, and we've got to reframe socially what does it look like to be a school teacher and make sure they feel supported and important.
So I don't know that there's a magic potion for what you're asking. You know, I'm trying to think of if I were a school teacher and I had to wake up every day to a job where I'm underappreciated, I'm underpaid, and I can't even be guaranteed my safety because there's just not adequate resources in the schools to prevent from being shot. I mean, how do you go to a job like that? There's a lot of things that we can do. Let's say, cut funding. Like, where do you want to do that for schools? Where do you start doing that? I mean, the very first thing we should concentrate on is making sure that our teachers are safe in their schools. And I don't care if that means armed guards or whatever. How do you go to a job if you can't feel safe? How can you concentrate on your job? How can you concentrate on your job and love your job if you don't have enough to put food on your table for your own children? So, yes, we need to throw money at it. I hate to sound like a liberal Democrat, but in this particular situation, we're starting out behind by not having paid our teachers adequately over a period of decades. They need more pay, they need more safety, and also I think we need to depoliticize, like we've tried to do, the environment, because a lot of teachers think that it's their job to teach our children certain theories about our history, critical race theory, for instance. That's just one more thing that adds to the frustration level of public school teachers when we got all that gook going around in their head. That they have to worry about whether or not their colleagues accept them because of something they think that someone else might not agree with. We need to take that politics out of our schools and squash it. The kids have enough time at home around the dinner table to learn about policy and values. We don't need our school teachers involved in that fight. It's not their job. It's not their place, really. So I think that we help the whole problem as a global problem, but definitely paying the teachers more money. But I would concentrate on their safety as much as their raises.
As someone who teaches in a non-tested subject area, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm fortunate to not have my qualifications as a teacher consistently judged by a test score. However, for many of my colleagues, this is a daily source of stress and pressure. Imagine your value as a teacher is based on a complex mix of factors that are completely out of your control. Students are struggling mentally and socioeconomically, and they are also expected to learn. Teachers and students are more than a number. With this said, should our accountability system be so dependent on the STAR or any standardized test? What factors of school quality would you like to see included when rating our public schools?
Is that me? Yes. I agree that we need some level of accountability, and the testing is probably important, but I think we rely far too heavily on that. I mentioned in my comments before, if we are testing, giving a test in English to a group of students that a teacher or a multitude of teachers have spent the entire year working, trying to get them up to speed to be able to take the test in English, and they get that group of students up as far enough to to come in the second or third percentile by comparison to another school campus that didn't have those challenges. We can't evaluate those teachers based solely on that. We can't evaluate those students based solely on that. So I think we rely far too heavily on it. I am completely open to accountability measures, but the people who need to decide what those accountability measures look like needs to be local control. The cornerstone of conservatism, the conservative woman that I've been for my entire adult life, is less government and local control everywhere where it's possible. Our school campuses and our school districts know what their challenges are, and they rise to meet those challenges. And they care about the result as much as anybody in Austin, Texas cares about the result. I know these teachers, these educators, they care about their students. They want the best outcomes possible. And if they're spending a lot of time teaching to a specific test and trying to meet a specific metric that is supposed to be one size all for every campus in the whole state, it's just not right. It's not right to the student. It's certainly not right to the teacher. And it's not, the outcomes we're looking for are not getting better. Texas educational standards by comparison to others are not increasing. And this is not resting on the teacher's shoulders. They're doing all of it. We have to look inward. We have to look to Austin. We have to look at how many things we've concentrated away from local control, where the people are face to face with the students every day. We can do better.
There are a few things in this question I want to address. So you mentioned something about mental health, ratings, and then also testing. So the first one being, when you look at the Panhandle, and really Amarillo, you have the north side, you have the south side. I mean, all these schools are very different. You have lower economic homes and kids that go to these schools, and some of them have one-parent homes, and they need counseling from the trauma at home. And so when we look at mental health in our schools, we have to support these kiddos. I mean, mental health is a huge problem that we see not only in the Panhandle, but really Texas. And we've got to make sure that we have people in these schools that can help these kids process through certain problems at home or in their schools, or bullying, or things on social media. I mean, what we're seeing on social media, that's a whole nother thing. But the reality is with mental health, we've got to make sure these schools have counselors and support that they can help these kids. The other part of this is when we look at, it kind of goes in hand with ratings. I mean, when I was at Eastridge Elementary, some of these kids come from one-parent homes, and they have a lot of trauma, and they come to school, and the needs they need are a lot different from other kids who have two-parent homes. And we've got to make sure that when you look at ratings, we take into and we allocate what are the other things going on besides just the student in the school. I mean, not education is one size fits all. Every kids are all very different. We've got to meet the needs of these kids. The last thing is testing. I had a conversation with a mom who she was picking up her kid from second grade. It was the last day of second grade, took the STAR test, and she said, how is that, you're a third grader now. And he said, no, Mom, I'm just a STAR test taker. And he lives in stress of the STAR test he has to take. So, look, we need accountability. We have to have testing to know where these kiddos are at. But I've heard a lot from parents here that the STAR test creates a lot of anxiety in these kids. So what I'm looking at as a legislator is, are there other ways that we have to have testing, we have to have accountability, but how do we allow these kids to not feel so much stress, and the teachers feel like I have to teach every little thing so they pass the test? We've got to kind of reframe what that looks like.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Right there.
Okay.
And you've got to turn around.
Yes, I've already addressed this. I don't see why the rest of the world can teach their kids with standardized tests, but we can't in America. Why is that? I think it seems to me like educators and their unions come up with every excuse in the world not to have standardized testing because it makes their job easier. Now, I'd like to think, and I'd be naive if I did, that every school teacher out there just loved what they did and went there for the benefit of the child, but it's a job for them. It's just like any other job. You get judged on your job based on your performance. For instance, if I went to trial and lost every time, I wouldn't get paid a lot of money, would I? I wouldn't get paid anything. And it's the same thing with every profession out there. We shouldn't lower the standards for teachers by making there's no line of accountability. There has to be some sort of testing. I'm not saying that we should stress our kids out to the point that they're having anxiety attacks and taking pills before school. But my God, I went through school. I mean, most of us here are a little bit older, and I didn't have any problem testing, taking a test once every week or two in math or whatever. I mean, that's the way you grow your mind. You don't grow your mind on a telephone or an iPad with your thumbs. You grow your mind by exercising that muscle. And we can't let kids, and our educators even, let kids get away with being too easy with that brain, with that muscle. And I think that cell phones have a lot to do with that, the easy way out. It started with little computers when I was a kid, but there's nothing wrong with testing. It's become an evil word when you start to talk about education, but I'm sorry. George W. Bush had it right when he was governor of this state and became president of the United States of America. We need something to prove that our children are being educated, and if they get out of high school and they can't read or write a sentence, and they can't do any type of math, they're not prepared for jobs. And I don't agree with this whole trend in America to de-educate and turn everybody into a laborer. Seems like that's what the Democrats want us to do, to make our kids so that they're less interested in school and more interested in driving a truck. Nothing wrong with driving a truck. I've done that before. But I will.
Well, when you get sworn in to a term in the legislature, your oath requires that you promise to fulfill and honor the Texas Constitution. So one of the provisions in the Texas Constitution, in fact, in the founders of our state who authored our original state constitution, and it's carried through all the way through, was a system of public education that works. So we have this provision that says that the legislature shall provide for an efficient system of public education. Now, what efficient means has been debated for decades, even centuries. The Supreme Court weighed in on it. Texas Supreme Court has weighed in on the issue. But one thing is for sure, we've got, as a legislator from the Panhandle, I have the duty under the Constitution not only to make sure that every student in the Texas Panhandle has access to a quality education, but even students in the lower Rio Grande Valley and East Texas, all over Texas. That's part of my constitutional duty. And so we've never figured out a way to assess how students are doing all over the state except with some type of standardized testing where we can compare students in one part to another part of the state, students in one school within a district to another school. Now, how you do that, that's the problem. That's the secret. That's what we wrestle with. It's difficult because there is a lot of money in student testing. It's a very lucrative business to be in, and so that money tends to taint the judgments sometimes. But that's what we're looking for. And so we'll keep debating it. I think the legislature is ready to move on to something else besides the STAR test. But where we go from here is the big question. And we have to look at, is it high stakes or low stakes? Is it a requirement for graduation? A lot of issues that are involved in that we'll need to continue to look at.
Finally, we know much of student overall outcomes are determined before they ever even reach a public school classroom. It's in that critical cognitive developmental period from birth to 5. That being said, would you support increasing funding and opening up admittance for all students to participate in full-day pre-kindergarten, and why?
Is that to me?
I think
That's to Ms.
so.
Miller.
Repeat that last part. Would I be open to?
Participate in full-day pre-kindergarten, and why?
I've heard of this a few times, and I don't have any necessarily opposing view on being open to this. What I'm looking at, and in this question it addresses a little bit about what kind of ratings, what do you want to see in our public schools and being taught. We can't have some of these teachers coming in, and we don't want them to feel obligated that they have to teach certain things that abide with our social culture, and allow them to have the ways that they believe they should teach. We need to teach them education. We need to teach them history, and we need to teach them those things. So I don't have any opposing views of having pre-kindergarten be open. I mainly care about, are we going to be able to have the resources? If we're going to do that, we've got to make sure that we have funding there and that we have the resources to make sure. We can't pass a bill that doesn't have funding with it or doesn't support the teachers in order to be able to do so.
Okay, so I've got 5 kids and 10 grandkids. Hi, kids. They're watching in Houston right now. Right now, currently a 14 and 11-year-old in school. We've been in both private schools and we've been in public schools. And I can tell you absolutely 100% certainty that the sooner we can get a child into the educational umbrella and start teaching them, the better off we are. I think that we will, and that's what you're talking about, right? Instead of half-day pre-K, full-day pre-K, and help with funding from the government, absolutely, why not? The sooner we get our kids in, they could be reading before kindergarten if we did this. I had one child that was actually reading at 3 years old. If we actually concentrate on the educational process that early and instill that in them, I believe that it'll become easier at kindergarten and first grade and second grade. I guess the bottom line is you can't start too early. Some people think that maybe that might be a little bit, I don't believe that. I think it's an absolute appropriate age, 4 years old, to get into pre-K before kindergarten and start getting them used to education and taking tests and passing tests.
Well, I would say before we even talk about the merits, we've got to ask the question, where are we going to get the money? Because it's a very expensive proposition if you talk about putting pre-K throughout the state in all of our school districts. One thing I would say is I would not put it on local school districts, because I can tell you that the school districts that I represent can't afford that. And we're talking about teacher pay raises. We're talking about a lot of other issues that are going to cost money. And so you don't want to institute a new program that's going to take away from the teacher pay raises that we desperately need in our system that we have right now. So beyond that, I think the funding needs to be from the state, but I think that participation in any program that you talk about in that regard should be made on a local basis, and even more specific to local, I think it should be a parental decision of the parents at that age, if it is made available through the public schools, that there would not be compulsory attendance, that parents could make the decision as to whether they wanted the children to go to the pre-K program or not. But I think realistically, we are not going to be doing that in the next session or two, because I just don't see the funds being available to do it.
So John's right. We can all agree that that would probably be a great program. And if you all want us to spend some more of your money, remember, government doesn't have money, only the money it takes from us. Sometimes it takes it directly and sometimes it takes it indirectly. But government's money is government's money. It belongs to you. And so, yes, that's a great conversation to have. I'm a mom. I'm a Mima of 5. I know exactly how important it is for that early intervention, that early time when you can teach children the joy of reading and the joy of understanding and the joy of asking questions. So I do think that would be a great program, and I would be very supportive of such a program. Another thing I will say, and this is a conversation I'm willing to have on that House floor and in those committee meetings on your behalf. One of the best bits of advice I was ever given as an entrepreneur, I was told a good business person thinks about tomorrow, but the best business person, the most successful business person, thinks about all the days after. And one of the things we have to do in education is look and see, what will this cost today? That's important because it's your money. What will it cost tomorrow if we don't do it? And what will it cost or save if we find a way to do it now? So absolutely, I would be open to that, but very sensitive to the fact that Representative Smithee's right. The price tag on that is incredible, and that would be your money. So we have to reprioritize some other things or ask you for more money.
Okay. Thank you for your responses and for your understanding the weight of the offices you're seeking on our state, children, and future. Thank y'all.
Okie dokie, returning to, thank you, Cassandra. If you've ever been lucky enough to visit her classroom at Tascosa, it is a beautiful, wonderful, safe haven for her kiddos, and she's doing the work. We are returning to our audience question. which I will now locate. Okie dokie. Mr. Quakenbush, this will be to you. Our audience question, this is now obviously back kind of to general topics. What is your plan to grow businesses and infrastructure within your district if elected?
Okay, so we've been debating and doing forums in a lot of the northern part of the Panhandle. And I start out by talking about where I grew up and how I was raised, and I've only got 2 minutes, so I'm going to go quickly. So I grew up in a very small town that was agricultural, 3,000 people total. My high school class was 100 people. And in that small town, we had one business that literally sustained everyone, one factory that was agricultural based. Everybody was a dairy farmer. Everybody produced some type of growth for this company. And this company supported this one little town for 150 years. The town is called Canajoharie, New York, in the Mohawk Valley. And the name of that company was called the Beechnut Baby Food Factory. And literally, I got to see the benefits by growing up in a small town like that, of if you could find one factory to come to one town like Spearman, like Perryton, and stay there. They will do everything to help your community with infrastructure, with your libraries, with your museums, with everything. So I have made it a vow to the northern part of the Panhandle that I will not just focus on Amarillo. We're doing fine down here. I will make it a priority of mine to concentrate on rural economic development. In other words, like an economic development corporation, go out and try to find them partners to come to the small towns that would like to open up in a small town and know the advantages of having a small town and supporting that. So having grown up in that atmosphere as a kid and still go back once in a while, I can tell you that these towns, most of them would welcome that type of an opportunity. Some want to stay small, but I would bet that most of them would like to have some type of a small business that's like that, that's sustainable, that's not a hog on water, that's not polluting the atmosphere, polluting their, something good like maybe the Beechnut Baby Food Factory. My idea was powdered milk. It's needed everywhere. There are Indian companies all, powdered milk. I'll remember that.
One of the things that we've discovered over the last few years is that one of the best economic drivers in any region is a university. University will create jobs, it'll create opportunity, it'll create offshoot growth. And so we have in the 86th district and also really in the 87th, we kind of are joined together. We have two major institutions. We have West Texas A&M University and we have Texas Tech, the complex here in Amarillo. And so we've been very successful over the last few years. First of all, at West Texas A&M, if you haven't been on campus lately, you really should, because we have got a world-class agriculture education complex down there. It's second to none. Even the Chancellor Sharp from A&M said, we don't have anything like this in College Station. It's truly a remarkable thing, and all of those buildings have been built in the last 10 years, and it's a whole new part of the campus. What they're doing is incredible in terms of agriculture research. A couple of sessions ago, we were able to get funding for the Texas Tech Vet School here in Amarillo, which is the only campus in the country where you have a vet school, a medical school, and a pharmacy school all on the same location. And the opportunity for research and development in that scenario is really limitless, and they're going to be taking advantage of that. So we've used that as a catalyst. But I think we've discovered, the Western Panhandle is an agricultural area. That's who we are. And so we're looking at ways, always looking at ways, and we've gotten good support from the Texas Enterprise Fund to get some of these projects here. We've gotten the dairy in Dalhart. We've got the dairy in Clovis, which feeds a number of, we have the cheese plant in Dalhart, the cheese plant in Clovis, which feed a number of our dairies up here. We have our billions of dollars in wind energy investment that has come in, and it's been a very good decade for the area.
Okay, somebody write this down. I agree with Jesse, but just on this one thing. I don't agree that we need more lawyers in the legislature, okay? I do agree that our secret weapon... I do agree that our secret weapon is those EDCs. And as I've been out visiting with our small town EDCs, I'm pretty familiar with the Amarillo EDC because in my work as a volunteer for the city of Amarillo and serving on the various boards that I serve on, I've learned a lot about our local EDC and how it works. But I have learned that those EDCs out in those small towns up in District 87 have been incredibly innovative in their approach. I visited with the EDC director for Borger the other day, and they have a whole housing development that was partially funded by their EDC through permissions from the Borger citizens and a way that they were able to work that through the EDC laws. So definitely those economic development corporations are a secret weapon for us, and we need to use them more, and we need to give them as much latitude as the taxpayers grant us to give them. The other thing that I would say is it's kind of been fashionable lately to villainize business, to villainize big business. And we need to do better of making everybody realize that some of those big businesses are what reinvest in our communities, and they help us invite and encourage others to relocate to our communities. So we need to always remember that those big businesses are our employers, they're our economic generators, and often they're the donors to our nonprofits. So we need to stop thinking of business as an us or them proposition and think of it as all us. It all inures to the betterment of the communities.
First off, really the Texas economy as a whole, Governor Abbott's done a wonderful job. I think we're, 7th, 8th in the economy. When we're looking at the Panhandle, majority of the 87th district is agriculture. I mean, agriculture is majority of what provides a lot of these jobs, and really what they're doing impacting the rest of Texas. So what I've been looking at, first off, to be clear with all of you, capitalism, free market, local control, those are pretty much the frameworks of how I make these decisions when it comes to the economy and supporting local businesses and allowing more jobs here in Amarillo. Tech and Texas Tech, what Representative Smithee said, and also WT, is doing a lot for the agriculture economy, and also allowing these students to go to school, be trained, go out into these rural areas where they were born and raised and grow those towns. And so what I'm looking at is continuing to protect these free market capitalism beliefs that we have as conservatives. And then also we want to just make sure that we support the industry of agriculture. It's huge. I mean, I think they produce about 27% of beef in the country. We've got to make sure that these packing plants, these feed yards, feedlots, ranchers, irrigators are supported. And then here in Amarillo, EDC Kevin Carter, I've met with him several times. What he's doing here in Amarillo is phenomenal. We got to continue to support him and really support these businesses here in Amarillo so that we can have more families come back here and work and continue to grow our industry here in Amarillo.
And thank you to the, right? Yes, that's correct. You answered. You started.
Yes, he started.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Powdered milk. That was it. Yeah.
Excuse me?
I was just making sure I wasn't skipping you. All right, a big thank you to the candidates of HDs 86 and 87.